Thank you, Stuart. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Local Pensions Board. My voice seems to be echoing in a slightly unexpected way. I'm Martin Gately and I'm the clerk to the board. The first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. So you may propose yourself, but you would need a seconder. So do I have anyone who wishes to nominate themselves as chairman of the Pensions Board? Thank you, Mr. Talani Malifi. Does anyone wish to second that nomination? Mr. Smith, thank you. Are there any further nominations? Right. Could I have then votes for Talani as chairman, please? If you could raise your hands to indicate. You may vote for yourself, I think, Talani. But that is unanimous. Would you care to join me on the dais then, Chairman, to chair the meeting? Stuart, we're experiencing like an echo, like a reverb of my voice around the chamber. I don't know if that'll be the same for everyone or not. Is there anything we can do about that? That seems to have immediately improved. Excellent. Let's move that slightly nearer to. Okay. And if you just work your way through the agenda, moving and then asking for a seconder when you get to recommendations. So the next item is the minutes. So over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much and welcome to our first in-person meeting for a while. Great to see you all and thank you very much for those of you who voted for me. I hope I'll live up to your expectations. Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 30th of March 2021. I can see that everybody's had sight of, and are we happy to agree this as a true and fair account of the meeting?
Chairman, I think Mr. Raisin has a couple of points on the minutes he wants. Chairman, I think Mr. Raisin's got a couple of points he wants to mention on the minutes.
Okay, Mr. Raisin.
Thanks, Chair. These are an extremely good set of minutes, I think, but the report that I prepared on the Scheme Advisory Board Good Governance review was quite long and quite involved, and I'd just like to suggest some subtle changing to the minute. This is in the last paragraph on page 3 of the papers. I'll read what it says. It says, there will be nationally set key performance indicators which cover standards of service, full stop. Both a business plan and a budget will need to be set. Could I suggest the word set is changed to prepared? So substitute prepared for set by the officer in charge of the LGPS, but also involving the chair of the committee. After that, the word committee, could I suggest the following, and I'll read it slowly for Martin. It says, and with the proper involvement of the
I was going to say, I was just about to point that out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item 3, apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies for absence?
Chairman, we have had apologies from Councillor Sally Longford, who is on other City Council business.
Okay. Thank you. Mark?
Please do, Mark. If you can't hear properly, please come to where you can hear. Declarations.
Right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the declarations of interest by members and officers. The notes are below and at the back of the agenda, and this covers the disclosure for pecuniary interests and the private interests, and that's pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Have we got any declarations? Okay. Thank you. Next item is we're going to move on to agenda item 5, which is the Local Government Pension Scheme Pension Administration Performance Report, which can be found on page 7. And the purpose of the report is to inform the Nottinghamshire Local Pension Board of the quarters to the year end up to March 2021 and the work of the pension administration team. Okay, all right. So, John, would you like to lead us through the meeting, through the agenda item?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as a beginning, this is obviously, as you have said, Chair, up to the 31st of March, and things.
I might just have a word with Stuart, see if we can do something about that. Do you want to just pause for a minute? Stuart, could you stop this? Stuart, could you pause the stream while we discuss the echo just for a minute?
Okay, thank you, Chair. As we said, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the performance of the pension administration for the financial year 31st of March 2021. As you can imagine, this has been a challenging year for the pension administration. Along with maintaining the service by moving to home working, the pensions landscape has continued to set the fund challenges, from the introduction of the exit cap and then its suspension, to the need for the fund to look to developing a response for the McLeod judgment. The report highlights the main activities that the administration team undertakes and how the administration team is organised with its resources. The report provides the cost of administration for 2020 and how we are benchmarked against other funds. However, 2021 data has yet to be finalised and included in our benchmarking with CITFA. This is not available till later this year. And in fact, we're putting the data together this week to send to CITFA. Data quality and improvement continues to be high on the pension regulator's agenda, and work is ongoing to improve our data, as we have seen a significant improvement in our common data, but a drop in our conditional data, which we hope will show an improvement once we're able to run our data reports in August and September following the completion of our year end. Excuse me. This will then be ready for the pension regulator return sometime in September, October. So we're about ready to run that information this week, next week, and we're still waiting for the pensions regulator to contact us around producing our scheme return. So that will happen, I suspect, over October. It's a little bit late this year. Normally we get it in August, but I haven't seen it yet, but I will be chasing them up. The data quality report is also linked to our data improvement work stream, and Sarah gave a bit of an update on that earlier in the year, and we will bring further information as we progress with data improvement. Just as told, the current membership, based on the three main classes of members, totals 145,000 members. The current number of active employers is 292 and will continue to fluctuate as we work with scheme employers to consolidate members' records. This is mostly related to multi-academy trusts, and I can report that there are 2 projects ongoing to transfer a number of schools into the fund from other local LGPS funds. These transfers, we believe, should be completed sometime next year. We completed one at the 1st of September, where we transferred 5 or 6 schools from Derbyshire and Leicestershire into Nottinghamshire, and we're having discussions with a further large academy trust to transfer a further number of schools from Derbyshire and Leicestershire, and in fact Lincolnshire and South Yorkshire. Some of the funds are now saying that they are not in favour of transferring schools across the borders, but this is a decision for the minister for I forget what it's now called, for well, it was previously called MHCLG, and they've renamed it, by the way, and so we have to so the schools have to apply to the ministry to transfer their pension provision to us, and some of the funds are now stating they're not going to support these transfers. So,
can I just ask a question, please, John?
Yeah.
When we take on board, say, a Derbyshire scheme,
yes,
does it come with its own liabilities, or does it come across fully funded?
The actuary does a lot of calculations and brings across. It should be fully funded.
Okay, because I didn't know whether it was bringing liabilities into our scheme, effectively making their scheme better off in inverted commas.
No, it generally calculations.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
One of the, I should say, one of the things that does attract or has attracted some of the schools is around, we pool our academies in the fund. We are looking to, and we've had discussions with the scheme actuary to look at that pooling and take some of those larger academy trusts into a single rate rather than a pooled rate. So that will become more evident as we go through the valuation next year. So in my report, I've included a list of new employers and types of employer bodies that have come in up to the 31st of March. It doesn't include the ones that we've transferred since that date, but they will be updated in the next report at year end. One of the other additions I've put into the report this year is I've set out complaints and employee disputes up until the 31st of March 2021. The most general complaint has been around calculations of benefits, ill health retirements, and a number of transfer cases. This year there have been complaints raised in relation to one of our AVC providers, the Prudential. This has not been just a Nottinghamshire issue, but has extended across other Lgps funds. The Prudential have been reported and have self-reported to the pensions regulator. Over from November, certainly up to and including around up to June, the Prudential was struggling to actually administer the AVCs. They'd introduced a new administration type system, and there were problems with collecting membership details and payments from scheme employers, plus also they were having difficulties paying out to members at retirement. We're still experiencing some issues with the Prudential. It has got a little better, but there are a number of individual cases still ongoing. As I said, this is not just Nottinghamshire, it's been across the whole of the Lgps. And you may have seen some reports in the Sunday press, certainly in the financial papers, around the Prudential and the difficulties they've been experiencing. The fund also continues to receive subject access requests from claims companies seeking information relating to members who have transferred benefits out and subsequently lost their pensions due to possible fraud. Again, this is an issue across the Lgps and is being monitored by the LGA. We have in the region of around 20. We've had in the region of around 21 requests for subject access requests over a period of time, and we've had to respond to these by issuing subject access requests to claims companies, where they have then raised complaints to the pension fund, and we're dealing with those on a day-to-day, on case-by-case basis. As I said, this again, other funds have had similar requests, and these are starting to ramp up over the have ramped up over the year. We just seem to be at the forefront of it at the moment. There is some national consideration on a response to these particular requests, and we're waiting for further details from the LGA. In terms of our year-end activities, The report shows there's been a decrease in the number of accurate returns from employers by the deadline. I can report, however, that all returns were received with 90% balanced and loaded into the administration system. The remaining 10% have outstanding queries, which were with the scheme employers, and we continue to work with scheme employers. This has meant that we issued all our annual benefit statements we were able to, and there's going to be a second run in November to tidy up any missed annual benefit statements. In the report, you'll see the performance data. Performance data shows that 4 quarters of the completed processes against the SITFA KPIs. Deferment calculations, I must point out, are always a challenge, along with transfers. This year, we've seen a reduction in the number of KPI processes completed. This has been mainly due to the difficult year, moving to home working and getting used to new processes, as well as the number of pensions queries that the fund has received. Certainly in the first 3 years of running from April, May and June, we experienced the move from the office to home working. There were downtime in systems and various other issues that we experienced in that time, and this reduced our ability to process some of our main processes. This has picked up over the year as we got used to home working. However, we have seen a slight drop. Member death processes have remained a challenge. Processes this year in particular have been challenging. As you can see in the data, the fund has followed the national trends in respect of mortality. The fund commissioned a scheme actuary. The fund commissioned the scheme actuary to undertake an evaluation of mortality and the impact of COVID on the fund. There is going to be a report presented by the scheme actuary to Pensions Committee in November, and will be coming to Pensions Board at the next meeting in December, and they will be doing a presentation on mortality, as we think it's obviously an important position to consider.
Do we estimate what the likely impact is likely to be? Is it going to make the funding better or worse, or? Because presumably people are dying prematurely than was anticipated, so
yeah,
the liabilities I would expect to be lower.
That is the case, and it's not going to have a significant impact, we believe, but clearly the scheme actuary will take that into consideration as part of his valuation, and will explain that in his presentation.
Okay, John, thank you.
Okay, so that's my presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Have we got any questions on the report? Yep. Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a request for clarification, please. Paragraph 6 on page 9 of 88. We've got a small table there of the costs per member. I'd just like to just be clear on the 2 different criteria that you're using, which I don't quite understand.
Oh, right. So what we do is we provide information to SITFA, and we have a benchmarking club. So we provide our costs across the pension fund, and they then calculate through their calculation process the fund cost per member, plus then an average cost per member in the benchmarking club. So the average cost is the cost of members from other pension funds across the benchmarking club, and there's about 30 members in the benchmarking club. All LGPS funds, mostly shire counties. There's a couple of metropolitan counties, and so we take our cost and we just show what the average cost is across other funds, just to give a view of the difference. Really, that's basic. It's quite a simple calculation. It's just all our costs and then against the number of members that we have.
But effectively, we're saying we're 30% cheaper than the average.
Yes.
Mark?
Sorry, Jonathan, just a quick question. Referring back to AVCs, when you spoke about complaints regarding the Prudential, are they the only provider that we use?
Good question. No, they're not. We use Scottish Widows as well. Scottish Widows, we don't have as many members in Scottish Widows as we do have in the Prudential. However, Scottish Widows haven't experienced the same issues because they haven't introduced a new administration system. What I can say, really, just as a general comment about AVCs, the providers have actually, how can I explain it? The providers have actually pushed down the administration of AVCs back to the funds. So they class us as trustees. So all information about an individual's AVC retirement has to actually come through the pension fund administration and be sent out to the member, rather than the AVC providers communicating directly to the individuals. So if a good example is if a person is retiring, we would pay obviously their retirement benefits out of the Lgps. We actually inform the AVC provider that person is retiring and wishes to take their AVC benefits. What the AVC provider then does is calculates their benefits. Rather than sending that estimate of benefit to the individual, they send it to us, which we then have to then send out to the individual, which obviously takes a lot more time. The problem that's happened this year is we've had problems getting that information from the Prudential. The Prudential have taken a lot of time in responding to those requests for benefit estimates. And when they have, we found that they've been incorrect because they've not added contributions onto those benefits. So we've had a perfect storm of trying to work from home, plus also having to administer the AVCs, plus the Prudential not actually having the correct information and sending us the correct information. So we've had a number of cases where we've had to have special meetings with the Prudential. The East Midlands Pensions Managers organised a meeting with a number of senior managers within the Prudential to express our concerns. That's been taken up nationally as well. They did put an improvement plan into place, which has started to make a bit of difference, but it's taken a lot of time away from the pension admin team trying to just administer AVCs. And we've had a number of complaints which we've passed on to the Prudential. To be fair, they've done their best, because I think the main issue was the introduction of their new administration system back in November. So that's where we are. but we have done as much as we can really to help members.
Any further questions? No, I've got just a couple. The first one is obviously with all the additional work that you have to do, are you resourced adequately?
I would have to say we have had difficulties with resources. We have gone back to Pensions Committee and sought additional resources, certainly for the McLeod activity that we're currently having to do, plus also to cover some of the extra work and data improvement activity that we're going to have to do. So we have been granted additional resources by the Pensions Committee on a temporary basis for 2 years. We've also, and Sarah's going to pick this up in her next report, sought additional resource around transfers and pension scams. So we have sought additional resources, we've been granted additional resources. The challenge for the pension fund now is to train that we can get resources and recruit, plus also to train those resources. So we will have to come back to Pensions Committee and to Pensions Board over the coming months or at the next meetings to update you, because McLeod in itself is going to be a huge resource. So to answer your question, no, hopefully we will be able to move on and get additional resources and recruit additional resources, but it is going to be a challenge.
Thank you very much. David?
I'd just like to say, if we're working at an average of £6 per member less than an average, even £1 per member would give you best part of £150,000. So I would have thought there was a massive amount of justification in order to get to the resource level that you need, particularly with the amount of work that you're likely to, which is going to increase going forward.
Sarah?
If I could just add to that, I think it's about all forms of resourcing. So it's not just about a human resource doing a calculation, doing a process. It's about our business process. It's about our transformation programme. So the key thing that underpins that is that data audit and improvement work stream, which has been running for a period of time. But that will be key to being able to move to other forms of automation, online services, etc. So I think there's got to be the right balance. The other thing with regards to McLeod and the additional resource that has been funded by committee and approved by Personnel Committee is that what John and I see that as is also some form of our succession planning for our workforce, because if we look at our current workforce, again, we need to be mindful of that. And I think, again, recruitment generally right across the country, if we look at our own recruitment stats from the recruitment service that we run at the Business Services Centre, we know we've got high volumes of adverts, but we've got low numbers of people who are physically submitting an application. Lots of people are looking, but I think actually people have a choice out there in the job market as well. So I think there are a number of things from our perspective that we have to look at to support the resourcing of the work, but mindful also of the national picture regarding recruitment at the moment as well.
Thank you. I've got just a follow-on, which is probably part of a later report. But in terms of your benchmarking with the other 30 groups, how are we doing in terms of that resourcing? Because I know there is a percentage of the fund that is used up in the pension administration, which is, I think, 0.44%. How do we measure up against the others nationally?
To be honest, Chair, I can't tell you off the top of my head. I would have to refer back to our benchmarking report. What I can say might be helpful is once we have issued our new data to CIPFA, like I say, we're due to do that this week. I can bring a report back once we get the results to pensions boards and allow you to and to bring a report on that. I can obviously get last year's, but I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. So.
Thank you very much. Have we got any further questions? The recommendation from the report is, and if you give me a second. Oh, no, thank you. That the pension board consider the performance of the administration of the pension fund and the continued development of systems and processes that will improve the service to members of the fund. Can I have a...
So if you want to move that and ask for a seconder, and I think we'll just move on.
Yeah. Can I move that and ask for a seconder? Great, thank you very much. We shall move on to the next item, which is the local government pension scheme and the pension scams. Obviously, one of the things that's been highlighted is that the growing sophistication of the scams and the effect of the fact that people can take their pensions early. So would you like to lead us through the...
This is Sarah.
Sarah, would you like to lead us through the report?
Thank you, Chair. So as Chair has said, this report is to update Pension Board on pension scam activities and the requirements of the Pension Regulator and the Pension Scheme Act 2021 on the Nottinghamshire Pension Administration Service, to also seek support from Pension Board to the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund commitment to the Pension Regulator's pledge to combat pension scams, and the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Pension Scam Action Plan, which is attached at Appendix 1 as approved by Pensions Committee in July of this year, and to also update Pension Board on Pension Committee and Personnel Committee approval to the funding and establishment of additional technical and regulation resource required to undertake pension scam due diligence checks. So members of the board will see from the background of the report that I have detailed their figures relating to scams. The Financial Conduct Authority and the Pension Regulator reported in August 2020 that around 30 million is lost to pension scammers or has been lost to pension scammers since 2017, according to complaints filed with Action Fraud. The true losses may be much higher. Pension scams are on the increase and becoming more and more sophisticated. During the pandemic, the Pension Regulator and FCA and also Money and Pension Scheme issued additional help and guidance. As a fund, we have a duty of care to do what we can to support and protect our members. Educating members is of paramount importance to assist people in spotting scams. I've detailed some of the telltale signs, such as unsolicited approaches, not being able to call a company back, being forced to make a quick decision, being pressurised, being asked to send documents via courier. In July, the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund committed to the Pension Regulator's pledge to combat pension scams, thereby demonstrating its intent to protect its members. The report details the 3 steps that we'll be required to take with the actions that as a fund we'll need to put in place. The Pension Schemes Act of 2021, which received royal assent in February 2021, is primarily aimed at strengthening the powers of the Pension Regulator. The Act contains a specific provision regarding transfer scam prevention. This will remove the statutory right of a scheme member to transfer their pension out where there is no genuine employment link. There will also be additional requirements which administrators must work through, as detailed at paragraph 22. To enable the Pension Office to implement the increased due diligence checks and requirements on the pension fund brought about by the Scheme Act, the fund's duty of care and obligations to protect its members and delivery of the action plan attached to this report, there is a requirement for additional technical and regulation officer support, which will provide the fund with sufficient resource to deliver on the proposals outlined in the report. Obviously, we've also considered other options, which is to do nothing. This isn't a viable option and may potentially expose the fund and members to undue risk, reputational damage and action by the pension regulator. To absorb this additional work into the pensions office team, but I think from the earlier discussion, we're aware that that isn't a feasible approach. So the recommendations that are detailed at the end of this report are that the Nottinghamshire Pension Board consider if there's any further action it requires to be taken to support the fund to combat pension scams. That the Pension Board also support the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund committing to the pension regulator's pledge to combat pension scams. And you'll see from my appendix that we'll be bringing forward some specific training for Pension Board committee and Pension Board members to undertake regarding scams. And finally, that the Pension Board also support the fund through its action plan as detailed at Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your report. Have we got any questions? I've got just a couple. The first one is on page, and I just find it. It was one of the indicators, and on it, it said, it was mentioned about a spike. It's on page 23, paragraph 14. It says to identify unusual or concerned patterns such as spikes in CETV. Could you explain what CETV is, please? Thank you.
Microphone, sir.
CETV is the cash equivalent transfer value. So somebody is wanting to seek to transfer their pension provision out of our fund, then we will give a cash equivalent transfer value. So that would be the pot of money that goes out of our fund and goes to the new pension provider. And obviously that is the same when people are transferring into us. It does depend on the type of organisation that any transfer is coming from and into us. So for example, if it's coming from another Lgps fund, that's an inter-fund transfer, so it has the same value with us as it would do, say, with Derbyshire. If it's coming from a private scheme, then we will actually give an amount of service credit that is equal to the value of that money that is coming into our fund. So that may well be different, but it is the actual value of the transfer.
Mark?
Regarding that one, sir, you know, like I said, that these scammers have got all this money. Has any of it ever been retrieved?
Not generally. I think people find that when they've been scammed, that money is lost. Obviously, as John said in his report, we are receiving an increase in the number of subject access requests where individuals have initially perceived that they've lost their pension fund through a transfer out, and we're having to demonstrate that we've provided all the necessary information to the member to make them aware of the risk. Obviously, with complaints such as that, they can progress through to the Ombudsman. There is a case that was brought to the Ombudsman against Northumbria Police, where they were found that they hadn't undertaken all the necessary due diligence checks. So at the expense of the fund, they had to reinstate that member's full benefits. We have been doing some work with Freeth's local law firm to really check that all the steps that we are taking from a due diligence point of view are robust enough to protect our fund. But we, as a fund, have not had to, have to pay out any additional fund. I'm not aware of cases that have come to us where people have or haven't recovered funds if they perceive them to be lost at this time.
Just another quick question. Regarding that one, you know, the information that you've given us regarding the scammers that are out there, is there anything that Notts County Council is doing regarding putting that information out to members to make them aware that these things happen?
Yep.
The answer to that is yes. In the benefit statements that we sent out this year, we included a a leaflet that the pension regulator had produced, and we've included that in with the benefit statement. So it's gone out to all actives and all deferred members. We actually, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and when we first went into lockdown and everybody was going into lockdown, the pensions regulator issued a number of statements around concern for pension scams. The local authorities were then issued with a letter from the pensions regulator. I say local authorities, I meant LGPS funds, were issued with a letter from the regulator, which we actually included in our transfer pack as well. Really, I suppose, doubling up on the information that we were already providing in terms of making it clear around pension scams. And then obviously Sarah has outlined in her report about the other activities that we're going to undertake. So we're doing as much as we can. One of the issues that we do experience, though, and this is really from a member's point of view, is members come to us and they want to transfer out. We issue them with all the documentation. We issue them with the not advice, but we issue with the information around scamming, what they should do. However, they also are very keen to transfer their information out because they've got designs on what they want to do with their money as well. And it's a difficult thing for pension funds because it's very much a balancing act, because as we get asked to transfer out, we advise them, give them the information that they need to make those decisions. They can read all the information that they want. At the end of the day, it's the individual's decision whether they transfer that out. And we've put a lot of things in place for them to do, but we still have insistence around people transferring out. At the moment, we've got a case ongoing where a person is insisting on looking at transfer out his pension, but he's due to retire and take his pension, but he's looking at transferring that pension out elsewhere. And the individuals then raise sort of complaints or issues that we're not moving fast enough, but we're trying to, it's a double-edged sword. We're trying to look after that person's pension, but also provide information for them to make those decisions about transferring out. So it's a double-edged sword for pension funds.
Microphone, please, Mark.
Yes, there is. From a pension fund point of view, we have the discretion not to transfer out a pension. I don't think we've ever taken that decision. I do know in another LGPS they've advised not to transfer out and have ultimately tried to say no, but in the end I think the transfer went ahead, having spoken to colleagues. But it's a very rare discussion, but we can say no. It's within our discretion.
Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Mark. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just to help us, excuse my ignorance, could you talk us through the process if a member requested that they want all the pension and they wanted to move it, how it would work?
It's quite a long process, really, but generally what happens is they'll come to us, they'll ask for what should have happened is they should have got some financial advice. So a financial advisor will have spoken to the individual. What we then do is they will come to us and seek and request a transfer value. We write to them and provide them with a transfer value with a lot of documentation with warnings in respect of transferring out. If it's above £30,000, they have to have financial advice before, and it has to be signed off as they've taken financial advice before we will progress it any further. Once they've got their estimate of benefit, they will then come back to us and say, yes, they want to proceed, and we will check all the documentation in respect of what advice they've had, who signed it, where it's going. We are then required to check up from a HMRC point of view whether it's a registered pension provider and what they're actually doing. Unfortunately, though, the HMRC list isn't always as what can I put, up to date as it should be, and it's no guarantee that the pension fund or the investment that they are transferring it to is actually legitimate. What's been put on to us now is we need to be looking at whether the pensions advisor or financial advisor is properly registered, and once all those checks have been put in place and have been checked, at the end of the day, once the individual has signed off that they've completed and they've completed all the checks, we will then issue the transfer. But there's quite a, it's taken me ages to go through all this, but they have to have it signed off. And this is what Sarah was alluding to in terms of we've double checked and double checking our process in terms of making sure that we've checked up. One of the other checks that we've been advised to do, and it's not always possible, is to ring the individuals up and talk to them. But that takes time and that takes a lot of resource. So we're looking into that and what's possible. But certainly for the case I was mentioning, depending on what comes back from this individual, I might decide to ring them up and say, what are you thinking of doing? Why are you doing this? Just because I'm quite concerned about this particular case that's going on at the moment. And I've actually, against the person's record, put a flag to say nobody's to transfer it out unless they've spoken to me first. So that I'll take some responsibility in deciding what we do next. And then Sarah and I'll have a chat and we'll decide what we do. But we're trying to be cautious, but also we get a lot of pressure from individuals. They want the money. The government's pensions freedoms legislation that came in a few years ago didn't help either, because people had expectations of release of their pensions, and where were they going to get a better investment than in the Lgps? So it has been dogged with issues over the years, and some of the cases that we've had are those type of people where they've taken advice from financial advisors. They've signed all their documentation, they've taken their transfers, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, they've lost there. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in Sarah.
I was really just going to add to that. I think obviously there is a role for scheme employers and unions to play in this. Obviously you have a large membership base. A lot of members will be members of public sector pension schemes. You know, and any support that you can give in, you know, raising the profile of potential scams with your members, I think right across, you know, the pension landscape would be appreciated. I think the Pension Scheme Act 2021, which is going to bring in these new due diligence checks, will strengthen our position with the introduction of a traffic light system, where if a company is on the red list, bit like a country, on the red list, then, you know, it will strengthen our ability to say no. But again, we have to consider, therefore, that what this may generate is an increase in complaints to us. And I think, you know, often complaints do come in to members of committee and boards and things that actually we would seek your support to support us in our response back to the members, saying, but we are doing everything we possibly can to protect your interests. So I think, you know, there will be a balance there as well. I think, you know, people are put under immense pressure by the approach that they've had and get carried away with thinking, I'm going to have access to this pot of money, I'm going to be able to do X and Y, and they forget that that pot of money is there to enable them to live out, you know, the rest of their lives as well. So, you know, I think that there's lots of different facets to this particular area, and we're doing what we can and really what we're able to do, but there are parts others have to play as well. Yeah.
Regarding that one, Sarah, I totally agree with unions will do their best to support our members, etc., when they come asking these questions, because I do get a lot come and ask me, because it's that initial having their hands on that pot. They don't realise that, like you've just spoken, it's there for the rest of their lives. So yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that. And actually just a thank you for all the additional work that you do, because I think sometimes when people wish to take their pension out, they don't realise just how vulnerable they are, or what they see is just the immediate, but don't see the long term. So thank you very much for that. Right, just going back on the recommendations. Do you wish me to go through them, or shall we just, I'm happy to move them. Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, let's get them all agreed. So,
Okay.
Agree, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Shall move on to the next agenda item, and this, I think there's 3 agenda items. We're going to be taken through by John Raisin. I hope it's, Hi there, John.
Hi, Chair.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Oh, great. You're going to take us through agenda items 6, 7, and 8. And I was wondering, do you want us to ask you questions at the end or as we go along?
Could we do the training board review first?
Yeah.
And then you ask questions, and we'll look at the training update after that, and the update on the Lgps after that. There are, of course, officer reports, so John may wish to add something into all of this.
Okay. Thank you. Do you wish to take us through agenda item 6?
7.
Oh, sorry, 7.
On to 7, yeah.
Sorry, apologies. 7.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the annual report on the activities of the board for the last financial year, 1st of April 2022, 31st of March 2021. This would normally be prepared by the chair of the board, but given that Councillor Harper, who previously chaired the board, retired from the county council at the last election, there obviously was no one to prepare that report, so I've prepared the report on behalf of the board. The first page of the report covers the purpose of the local pension board. I think we're all well aware of that now, so I'll pass over that. The next page refers to the fact that we had the required number of board meetings, which is at least 2. I also refer to the fact that we had a board workshop, and I'll come to that later. There's a chart there on page 36 of the agenda which shows the issues that were discussed last year. The risk register, as in previous years, was an important part of the considerations of the board. There was active questioning and commentary by board members, and that of course accords, I think, with the pension regulator's hopes, because the pension regulator certainly anticipates that boards will look at risk registers at every meeting. I think the risk register also gave the board an opportunity to receive reports from both the admin and the investment officers as to the operation and continued successful operation of the fund during COVID. As in previous years, the focus of the board is on pensions admin. As I say in the report, that's correct. This is a board consisting of representatives of employers and employees. And I think pensions admin is the big issue, both if you're an employee, because you want your records to be absolutely correct, and from an employer's perspective, because employers have a massive duty, overriding legal duty, to provide appropriate information at the appropriate time in the appropriate form to the administering authority. I refer there to the reports that were received by the board, that's on the bottom of page 37, regarding the performance, transforming pensions administration, and information technology systems updates. All of these again were I think received by the board, and again there was active questioning and active comment on those. The board received important LGPS updates both from the pensions admin manager John and myself, issues such as the McLeod case, exit payments, and other broader LGPS updates during the year. On page 39, I refer to the pension board workshop of the 4th of February 2021, which all the members that are present now that were members of the board at the time attended. I think that was one of the perhaps most important meetings we've ever had. It was an informal meeting, but it was an opportunity to look at the governance and experience so far of the board, and for members, officers and myself as advisor to make proposals. I think quite a lot of, well, not quite a lot of important items came out of that, a number of which were subsequently reflected in the pension board work programme, which was approved at the last board meeting. And I think it's important to record that there was consideration of governance. There was a review that there should be attendance at external seminars. I think there was also agreement that there should be a closer relationship built with the pension fund committee. An issue, I think 4 meetings a year, was also agreed as something that the board should be pursuing in principle. I'd just like to thank or conclude by thanking the officers for their support. The support we've had from John and from Sarah and from the investment officers during the year, I think I can say on behalf of the board, has been exemplary as in past years. And I too have received a lot of support and had a lot of positive conversations with the board officers, and that's really I think all I'd like to say. I'm happy to answer any questions from members.
Right, have we got any questions?
Chair, can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
Just as I think it's appropriate now, but we are due as well to start to look at recruitment to other board members over the coming months. So I thought it'd be more appropriate to mention that now in this part of the meeting. But myself and Martin will start to consider and look at that over the coming months.
Thank you very much. Right, any other questions? Councillor Perdue-Horan.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Raisin for what seemed to have been a very comprehensive report from me, looking at what the previous work was as a new member. So thank you very much. It was very detailed and helpful. Thank you.
Could I just say something actually in response to that? I think it's a very helpful comment actually, because part of the reason that the report is written in the way it is of course that the intention is for the pension fund committee to receive the report in due course. And in a sense, it's set out the way it is also for the information and assistance to the Pension Fund Committee, because of course ultimately this board has a role in assisting the committee, and the committee obviously needs to understand fully what the board has been doing and how it has been doing it and why it has been doing it. So that's part of the reason, but I'm very thankful for that comment.
Right, and I think I'd like just to concur, as some of us have been on the committee for a long time, for the support that we've had from the other members and officers, really. So, and our thanks to our previous chair as well, who stood down. But hopefully, are we happy to move the report? Thank you. Right. Next item is again the training plan update report.
Thank you, Chair. This report really comes from the last board meeting when the work plan was approved, and it was agreed that I would prepare a paper on training going forward. I think it's a particularly opportune time for this to happen because we've had a number of changes to the board, and as John has just said, we are due to recruit to members of the board. And I think really now we've three long-standing members of the board who are here today, but other members, will be newer, and we'll have completely new members. So really, this in many ways tries to set out a framework for the board going forward, taking account of the fact that we only have now three long-standing members from the original cohort. So the report starts by reminding us of the background that the Pensions Act 2004 specifically requires under primary legislation that you have knowledge and understanding. It also refers particularly to the CIPFA Code of Practice, which really is the core document that sets out the training, knowledge and understanding that you require. And I talk about the CIPFA knowledge and skills framework and the 8 areas of knowledge you're expected to have. Then from pages 46 to 48, I talk about the proposed methods and sources of training. And essentially, I will go through that CIPFA framework again. We started that again recently, where we had early this month a session on legislation and governance. I'm quite content and will produce sessions on the other modules, particularly for the new members. But also in that I talk about other areas of training, particularly bringing in the fund actuary, who I hope will be coming to the board in the near future to talk about particularly the next actuarial valuation and also his work more broadly, and also the need for the board, I think, to be involved more with external seminars, etc. For example, I refer there to the CIPFA Barnet Waddingham Pension Board updates, which are very useful for pension board members. I mean, I attend them as in my role with the Merseyside board, and I have to say that they're very valuable. So I cover that on pages 46 to 48. I then, on page 48, refer to training needs analysis, and I think that's something we need to do on an annual basis, that board members need to undertake a training needs analysis, so that will inform the officers and myself of the sort of training that should be put on. And then on pages 48 and 49, there is a summary of my suggested ways that training should be provided. I won't go through them, but content to answer any questions. But I think those sort of 11 proposals hopefully will provide a comprehensive way forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. Any questions to John? David?
I just had one question, John. In the report earlier on, we were sort of saying that we have to do a sort of scam module on the pension regulator trustee toolkit, and you've not mentioned that. Is that because it's so new? Because I think there was an intention that we had to do it by the end of October, effectively.
It is so new. When I wrote that report and went on the pension regulator's website and looked at the toolkit made no mention of scams. The toolkit was, so far as I could see, as it previously had been back to 2015. So that would be, an update since then. And we'll come in the next report, David. There's been a lot of activity actually since I wrote those reports, which was only a little while ago. So that'll be a more recent update. But obviously, again, I think it comes into this whole theme that I think runs through the report, that we need to be looking at updating all the time. So that's a very good point, and I think a very cogent example.
Okay, thank you, John.
And just in addition, I know that to the other members that Martin did send us an email about the Barnet Waddington training that was going on, and encouraging all members to sign up for that. And thank you very much.
Echo that, Chair. I've attended those now, I think, in the Merseyside role for about the past 5 years. You'll pick up, a lot of useful information, but there's also an opportunity to engage with members of other boards. And other boards are in very different places. Some are in similar places to Nottinghamshire. Each administrative authority, each board is taking a different approach. You'll be able to see what others are doing. Some of that practice may be helpful to you. Some of it maybe it'd be less helpful. But I think it's very useful and very informative. And they are good sessions, and they are covering current issues. And there tends to be good debates in them. So, I would.
Very much. John?
Can I just add to that? Just in terms of those, the pension fund is able to pay for those. So as long as we get a PO and I've got the cost code. So if people go through, if board members go through Martin, get a PO, I'll provide the cost code for it, and that can be paid.
Yes, I think that's quite important, because I know that I've registered for the course in October with Barnet Waddingham, and I think they were waiting for a purchase order or whatever. So,
which one have you registered for?
The one that was emailed out a couple of weeks ago.
Is it the 5th? Is it the 5th? Is it?
Yes, that could be. Or
yeah. I'll dig that out, then I'll get you.
I think it's only because it was offered once on their website or whatever. So, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. John, again, thanks very much for your report. And I'm happy to move it. Can we have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Perdue. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9. John would like to lead us through that one as well.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I prepared this report on the 9th of September. I have to say there's been quite a lot of activity since the 9th of September, and I will seek to cover that so far as I can in the briefing. This report covers 4 important LGPS issues. I'll go through them one by one. First one are the awaited LGPS consultations. I think 2 significant consultations that are awaited from LGPS, or from the MHCLG as it was then called, but it's recently changed its name, and I'll come to that in a minute, are firstly on investment pooling guidance, and secondly a consultation on what's called TCFD reporting, which is a task force on climate-related financial disclosure reporting by the LGPS. Just to look first at investment pooling, you'll all recall that in November 2015, the government issued guidance which encouraged LGPS funds to form investment pools. These pools have the purpose of investing assets on behalf of individual LGPS funds, and there are 8 pools formed across the country. Nottinghamshire is part of what's called the LGPS Central Pool. Now, what I say in this report, and it is quite important, is, and I've underlined it on page 55, that crucially all asset pools are creations of their constituent LGPS funds and ultimately accountable to them. Furthermore, all assets continue to belong to the individual funds, not the pools. These asset pools exist only to serve the funds who created them and who own them. I'd just like to make that quite clear, because you hear an awful lot about investment pooling, and sometimes it appears that organisations such as LGPS Central, I'm not saying that in any way any asset pool is seeking to do this, but the way it may appear is that somehow they are more important than the LGPS funds. No, they are not. LGPS funds retain responsibility for investment strategy, which is the most important part of investment. They retain ownership of all assets. No assets are passed over in terms of ownership. It is merely that over time, the appointment of external investment managers will pass to these pools. That's all that's changing. Nothing changes in relation to other governance issues, such as funding or relations with the actuary or relations with employers or pensions admin. So pools have a rather limited remit, and I just want to point that out because I think sometimes the amount of conference coverage and press coverage can make us think that they have a rather or much larger role than they actually have. So I'll just say that just to be clear to everyone. Now, this consultation we've been awaiting has been awaited for a long time. The first guidance was put out in 2015. It's quite clear there needs to be updated guidance. The government did put out some potentially updated guidance or consultation in 2019, but they withdrew that consultation. Last year in November, they did state that they would consult sometime during 2021 on a strengthened framework. However, it seems unlikely now that this consultation will actually occur during 2021. And there's a number of reasons for this. As you'll know, early this month, the Prime Minister reorganised the government. He reshuffled the government, and we now have a new Secretary of State. The Right Honourable Robert Jenrick, who had been Secretary of State since 2019, has left the government and has been replaced by the relevant Secretary of State by Michael Gove, Right Honourable Michael Gove MP. Luke Hall, who had been a Minister of State responsible for the Lgps for the last year, since September 2020, has left the government. As of last night, the Minister appointed to oversee local government and the Lgps had not been announced. A ministerial team has been announced under Michael Gove, but which minister exactly is looking after the Lgps as of last night was not announced. So clearly that may, lead to further delays. I understand that the major priorities of the DCL, or the department, which actually is now called the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, DLUHC, that's its new term, that the two priorities for that ministry, so far as I understand, and this is based, I think, on fairly reliable sources, are the TCFD consultation, which I'll come to in a minute, and also issuing something further on remedying McLeod. So it appears likely that the consultation on the investment pooling will come out in 2022 rather than 2021. Now, I can't say that for definite. It's a matter for the government. They could issue it tomorrow, but it appears likely, given particularly also there's a small team of civil servants, that may be delayed. When that does come out, it will set proposals for the framework going forward for pooling, and this is just my view. It's not Nottinghamshire Fund's view, but I've underlined it. I would suggest it's important for Lgps funds to ensure that there is absolutely no further drift of responsibility from funds to pools, because, as I said, pools are there merely to serve funds. Funds are under democratic control. It is the elected members of the Nottinghamshire County Council who are responsible for the Nottinghamshire Fund, and that is absolutely, totally correct. The people who run the Lgps Central or any other pool are not elected by the people. They are not answerable democratically as councillors are, and that's why I say it's very important that we, the democratic mandate is retained. To move on to TCFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Reporting Disclosures. The requirement for this has already been set out for private sector funds by the Department for Work and Pensions. They've issued regulations. These do not apply to the Lgps. The relevant department, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, needs to issue these. I understand this is an absolute top priority for them, and that's not surprising, because given the DWP have not only had a consultation but issued final regulations, and the previous MHCLG had not even issued a consultation, and the private sector will be subject to this requirement very soon, it's little surprise that the LGPS regulations need to be put in place. So we expect this consultation out soon. I have heard on fairly good authority it's likely to be issued in October. To move on to the next issue, age discrimination in the LGPS, commonly referred to as McLeod. Again, I understand that this is the second priority, along with TCFD, for the MHCLG, or the Department for Levelling Up Communities and Housing, as it now is. I think that was already indicated by the fact that the previous Minister, Luke Hall, had outlined how the government will proceed, and also the fact the government is putting through Parliament at the moment an Act of Parliament to change the primary legislation, which needs to be changed before they can change the regulations. And the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Officers Bill has now received its second reading. It is now in the committee stage. And in fact, some more detail about how the remedy for the LGPS and other public service schemes will be applied may come out in that committee stage. But once that bill becomes an act, the government, I think, will move fairly quickly to implement regulations to enable funds to put in place the remedy to remove the age discrimination from the LGPS. To move to the third issue that I cover here, which is the pension regulator's consultation on a new code of practice. The pension regulator has 15 codes of practice in all, 14 of which relate to the private sector in some way or another, and one code 14 which refers to the public sector. In March 2021, the regulator issued a combined code of practice, or a consultation on it, which sought to combine 10 of the existing 15 codes, including code 14, into one consolidated code. Really, this was just an amalgamation of the code with some updating. Also, of course, the proposals in that code relating to investment do not relate to the LGPS, because the pensions regulator has no responsibility for investment matters in the LGPS. That is a matter for the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities alone. The consultation closed on the 26th of May, and 103 responses were received. It appears the pensions regulator has been thinking very carefully since, because they have now issued an update, and I quote from that, saying they are carrying out a full review of the comments. They intend to engage further with respondents to that consultation, and that they do not expect to lay before Parliament, that is, make up a final proposal on the consolidated scheme before the spring of 2022. So I think the pensions regulator is talking further with interested parties, and may amend its proposals as a result of that. I think when that final version comes out, it will be absolutely crucial for the fund to look at that as a matter of urgency, and to determine the extent to which it complies with the requirements if they change from Code 14, because I know that I think that the fund is fairly confident in its position with regard to Code 14 requirements, but there may be some updating in the final version. The final issue that I cover there is the change in the normal minimum pension age. There was a consultation by the government earlier about this, and the government announced on the 20th of July that with effect from the 6th of April 2028, so that's 6.5 years' time, the normal pension age will, or the minimum pension age, the minimum age you can take your pension, will change from 55 to 57. This is in accordance with the government's view that the minimum pension age for drawing a pension should be 10 years below the state pension age, and also corresponds with the government's view that pensions should support people in later life. There will be detailed sort of guidance and regulations issued in due course, and it's a matter the fund will need to look at, in the coming years. And they'll need to take account of any changes to the LGPS regulations and other guidance received. So those are the four issues, Chair. Happy to take any questions or comments from members.
Right, have we got any questions or comments? No? Sorry, John, I've got just a couple. The first one is, you mentioned that when the pensions regulator issues the final version of the consolidated code, who will
Chair. Maybe if you switch your mic off.
Thank you. Sorry, John, we just got had a bit of an echo, but I'm just going to check that when the pensions regulator issues the final version of the new consolidated code, who will receive it and who will take on the job of ensuring that it's fully, partially, or does not comply with each element?
Well, that'll be a publicly issued code, so that'll be available on the regulator's website to anyone who wishes to look. But obviously, responsibility for compliance with the code rests with the fund officer. So the fund officers obviously will look at that code and see whether there's been any changes from code 14 and make suitable arrangements.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer on that. And my final one is it relates to the increase in the age for pension. Does that include age plus service, or will it just be age only, age dependent? So,
sorry, Charles, I'm slightly. Should you just clarify that question, please?
Oh, okay, it's just part of the consultation mentions to increase the age from 55 to 57. Is that just age only, or does that age and service?
No, that's age only. So the minimum age normally, unless there's any, there may be some protections, but that they would be limited. There may be some transitional arrangements, but in essence, and this is a national thing applying to anyone in any pension scheme, with possibly a few exceptions, but the minimum age which someone will be able to take their pension, unless for ill health, for example, would rise from 55 to 57. So it wouldn't matter how much service they have or anything else. It will be 10 years less than the state pension age. So in 2028, in usual circumstances, someone will have to be 57 to come to John and say, I would like to take my Lgps pension. Now, there may be some transitional arrangements, but in general, that will be the situation.
Thank you very much. Have we got any further questions? The recommendations, I'm happy to move the recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, David. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is agenda item 10. Sorry, Councillor.
Apologies. The recommendation, the second line, consider the activities of the Scheme Advisory Board and is appropriate update. Is that, should that say, instead of is, should that be if appropriate? That would read better, wouldn't it?
If we're amending it, Chair, we'd need somebody, even for a typographical amendment, to move the change and then second it. So, John, did you drafted that? Is it supposed to be if?
I wonder if it's because of the echo, or because Talani's design and Francis' design. John, isn't it? And if appropriate, update the work programme to reflect the recommendations of the scheme advisory.
So it is if.
Yeah.
So that's a simple typo.
Nevertheless, I can't speak anymore. Sarah, if you could turn yours off, I might be able to assist. So, Chairman, we'd still need somebody to move that typo to the correct wording and then someone to second it, please.
Okay, right. Can I think I'll move it, and we've got Councillor Purdo.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt? I think that that sort of heading, the agenda item 9, it says report of the service director. It isn't a report of the service director, so consequently, I think the recommendation is flawed.
What, John?
Can I come in there?
Yes.
This, just in terms of this, we've had a few discussions about this because these are covering reports, David, and we may want to think about how how we do those in the future, because
Sorry, my mistake.
As a covering report, we have to put the service directors.
My apologies.
But you are right in what you're saying.
In which case, I will propose the amendment of the wording.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seconders? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, and then we can go back, and I'll just check with Martin that we'll go back to the recommendation now that we've agreed on the amendments. Is there any further amendments? Nope, I'm happy to move it. And we've got seconder for moving the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item is item 10, and this is looking at the fund risk register. And the main bits to remember about this is that it looks at the key elements for the internal control and its approach to sound governance, and it recognizes and highlights and puts in mitigation actions to anything that it sees as having an impact on the way the fund either achieves its purpose, objectives, or operationals. Would you like to take us through the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really, this is a dual report from admin and finance, and really, we produced the report. We're required to provide the risk register on a meeting by meeting basis, and really, rather than trying to take you through it as a point by point, it's really, are there any questions in relation to the risks that I've identified? Clearly, we've addressed one or two of them in respect to some of the questions around resources, but if there are any other aspects, obviously I can't speak for my finance colleagues, but I'm happy. Oh, is Kieran there? Oh, sorry, I didn't realise. So if
I am
Kieran,
here.
Right. Hi, Kieran. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So clearly, Kieran can pick up any questions in terms of finance.
Okay. Got a question from David?
There's only one from my perspective, because obviously looking at the inherent risk and the current risk, there's only been one change since the last time we spoke. So that's obviously the fourth one down, risk INV 6. Lgps central incurs net costs or decreases investment returns. Obviously the risks seem to be lower. So does that mean that they've actually got better investment returns or lower costs than were anticipated?
I'll have to refer that one back to Tamsin, the investment manager, and get the answer back to you. I'm afraid I can't answer that one off the top of my head.
Okay, thanks, Kieran.
John, you've got your mic on. Do you wish to add? Okay, that's fine. Okay. We got any further questions on the report, on the risk register? I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much. The last item is the pension board work programme for 21 to 22. And John, could you take us through?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the work programme, as John said earlier, we put this work programme together following on from the meeting back in earlier in the year. Really, just it's as it stands at the moment. As I've already said, we've invited the scheme actuary to come along for the next meeting. They will be providing information in respect of the valuation, which is really important because it's our valuation year next year. So we wanted them to pick up on informing the board really, and informing the board on the valuation process, giving you an opportunity to talk to the actuary as well, because I don't think the actuary has actually been to one of our meetings. So we thought that was really relevant, given that we've just re-procured Barnet as our scheme actuary for the coming years. We also felt, as I said earlier in my presentation, around giving you understanding of the mortality report that we've had done. Myself and John went through this as well, and really have just picked up some of the main activities that we believe the pension board should actually be made aware of. As I said, we have got a report to come to you about the good governance. We have reported on this on a number of occasions throughout the year of good governance, but this will be a report in relation to the project, what the impact of and the recommendations have been from the good governance national project, and how that should, what the implications are for the pension fund. John's talked about the regulator's single modular code. As we said, we're not quite sure when we'll get that. We've put that on the work programme, and we'll review that as we get information from the regulator. There's internal audit report to come to yourselves. We will have the pension regulator's governance administration survey. Again, that also depends on when the regulator issues the survey. So again, it's normally issued around November, December. It was a bit later last year, and we got it in January, February time. So again, all these are subject to the dates, but we feel that we've got a number of main activities covered across the fund. But clearly, this is open to the board to add to if there are any particular items or issues you want officers from finance and admin to respond to. So I suppose the floor is open to yourselves as well.
Thank you. David?
Just a quick one. I think it's extremely thorough. I know that at the last meeting we did say that we'd have a look at the pension fund annual accounts, and I can't quite see that on the schedule unless I've missed it. So I'm just wondering when there's the most appropriate time during the year to actually look at those after presumably they've been produced by the auditor.
Can I refer that to my finance colleague, please?
Go on, Kieran.
Yeah, they haven't been published yet because I don't think the auditor's finished. So they'll definitely, they'll probably be around for the next pensions board, but I'm not quite sure what the date of that meeting is.
We've got one in December, I think.
I dare say they can be tabled for that meeting.
That's okay. It's just that we did resolve at the last meeting that it would be added to the work programme. I'm just making sure that it is added to the work programme, if that makes sense.
I'll make sure I add
Thank
that,
you, John.
David.
Right, any further questions? I've got just a quick one, which is, I think you said that it's up to the members to kind of feed in anything they want to go onto it. What is the best way of doing that, and who to send them to?
I would suggest that you raise it here, then we may be able to scope up the report in consultation with the board members at the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Right, that was right. I'm happy to move the recommendation, which is that the pension board considers whether any amendments are required to the work programme. Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much. And that is the last item on our agenda. Apart from a thank you for the people who have presented and for our members who have attended. And thank you very much for your questions and input. And we'll see you in December at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. Stuart, if you could stop the stream now, please, the meeting's